Okay, let's get it. Let's get it. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael Music, and I was actually painting right before this, and as I was pouring out the paint, I realized like, holy crap, it's already 10 a.m. I gotta read Think and Grow Rich, and so I finished up a wall, and then I was like, okay, let's pause for right now. I'm gonna get back to reading Think and Grow Rich. And so, yeah, it is what it is. Not gonna let that put me down. Anyways, my name is Michael Music. I am 22 years old. I just graduated college recently. I've been reading this great book called Think and Grow Rich, and we've been really getting through the entire book recently. If you guys want to go back, watch the other episodes. I think this is episode 20, and we are currently on chapter 13, The Brain. So a little bit about this book. I was reading it, and this is like one of the most popular books on personal development. And in the beginning of this book, it Napoleon Hill actually said something, that there's a secret in each one of these chapters, and the secret is repeated over 100 times, and it is really up to you to find the secret, and that secret may be the key that really helps you make that decision to become rich and do what you got to do. So that's why this book's special. Napoleon Hill, the author of this book, has spent 25 years of his life studying some of the most successful men in the entire world. And he accumulated knowledge from all, I think it was 500 men. I think he accumulated knowledge from all 500 of these men, condensed that together, and created this book right here, Think and Grow Rich. So this is not only Napoleon Hill's knowledge, this is knowledge from some of the 500 most successful men in the world at the time. And he was given this idea by Andrew Carnegie to create a philosophy for success. And now, I think if someone was to spend 25 years, I think he went 20 years without even getting paid or compensated for anything. And after 25 years of really creating this philosophy, I think it's worth sharing. I read the book before. It was some good stuff. And truthfully, when I read it, I did not get rich. And I was like, like, what's going on? Turns out a lot of people make this mistake. They read it one time and they don't really see any difference in their life, right? And the secret is that you gotta read it more than once. You can't just read this once. I've been reading it since I was 19. I'm 22 now. I haven't been reading it every day, but I've read it well over 30 times on certain chapters. I've read it probably 5 times from front to back, and now I'm just going to really have a group discussion of teaching, not teaching this book, but having a group discussion, sharing with you guys what I understand of this book, of the knowledge conveyed here, and yeah, I'm just trying to provide value in some way. So after that introduction, we're going to be on page 298. If you got the book, I highly suggest bringing it out and reading it along, because I don't I don't necessarily have subtitles or PowerPoint slides. If you're on YouTube and you don't have the book, one thing you can do is actually go to those three dots in the right corner and enable subtitles, and at least you'll see the words popping up so you can read along with me. But I would really recommend getting this book and reading along, because this is stuff's legit. I had a mentor of mine who read this book for 60 years in a row every single day, and he's been teaching it actually himself, and that's kind of what inspired me to share this knowledge with you. Um, yeah, okay, enough chatter. I'm gonna read chapter 13, The Brain, page 298. A broadcasting and receiving station for thought, the 12th step toward riches. Whew. More than 20 years ago, the author, working in conjunction with the late Dr. Alexander Graham Bell and Dr. Elmer R. Gates, observed that every human brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. Every human brain is a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought through the medium of the ether, in a fashion similar to that employed by the radio broadcasting principle. Every human brain is capable of picking up vibrations of thought which are being released by other brains. In connection with the statement in the preceding paragraph, compare and consider the description of the creative imagination as outlined in the chapter on imagination. The creative imagination is the receiving set of the brain, which receives thoughts released by brains of others. It is the agency of communication between one's conscious or reasoning mind and the four sources from which one may receive thought stimuli. So, what are those four sources again? Remember, going back to a previous chapter, the chapter on the mystery of sex transmutation, those four sources from which one may receive thought stimuli includes infinite intelligence, one's own subconscious mind, the minds of other individuals, and the subconscious minds of other individuals. You can find that back on the chapter, The Mystery of Sex Transmutation. So I'm gonna pause right there. Every human brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. Think of each brain, in a sense, a great metaphor for this would be like its own individual radio tower, and it can send signals and receive signals. And we're gonna dive into this concept deeper in this very chapter. But keep in mind that he mentions that the creative imagination is the receiving set of the brain. So, what does that mean? What does that mean that your creative imagination? What is the creative imagination, and why is it the receiving set of the brain that receives thoughts released by other brains? Okay, continuing on. When stimulated or stepped up to a high rate of vibration, the mind becomes more receptive to the vibration of thought, which reaches it through the ether from outside sources. This stepping up process takes place through the positive emotions or the negative emotions. Through the emotions, the vibrations of thought may be increased. So through the emotions, the vibrations of thought may be increased. And keep in mind that you wanna increase the vibrations of thought. So in the last chapter on the subconscious mind, we went through the 7 positive and the 7 negative emotions, and it turns out you can actually step up your brain to a higher rate of vibration. And the reason, and why would you want to do that, right? It's because the mind then becomes more receptive to the vibration of thought, which reaches it from the ether or outside sources. So you're going to be able to literally come up with new downloads much more instantaneously if you do step up the vibration of thought you have through the 7 positive emotions listed in the subconscious mind. Okay. Vibrations of an exceedingly high rate are the only vibrations picked up and carried by the ether from one brain to another. Thought is energy traveling at an exceedingly high rate of vibration. Thought, which has been modified or stepped up by any of the major emotions, vibrates at a much higher rate than ordinary thought, and it is this type of thought which passes from one brain to another through the broadcasting machinery of a human brain. Okay. Have you ever had a moment where you look at one of your friends and you know exactly what they're thinking just because say you're like cracking up about a joke or something? That's kind of a good example of what he's saying up here. And you like you're laughing because some funny inside joke that you and your best friend may have, and you know exactly what they're thinking. Later on in this chapter, we're going to actually talk about telepathy, but Napoleon Hill is saying that vibrations of an exceedingly high rate are the only vibrations picked up and carried by the ether from one brain to another. So when your thoughts are stepped up by any of the major emotions, this will go to someone else's brain much faster, and they will actually pick it up, and you will be able to pick up their thoughts much faster too when it's stepped up. Continuing on, the emotion of sex stands at the head of the list of human emotions. As far as intensity and driving force are concerned, the brain, which has been stimulated by the emotion of sex, vibrates at a much more rapid rate than it does when that emotion is quiescent or absent. The result of sex transmutation is the increase of the rate of vibration of thoughts to such a pitch that the creative imagination becomes highly receptive to ideas which it picks up from the ether. On the other hand, when the brain is vibrating at a rapid rate, it not only attracts thoughts and ideas released by other brains through the medium of the ether, but it gives to one's own thoughts that feeling which is essential before those thoughts will be picked up and acted upon by one's subconscious mind. So this is making me think, there's this one great author, his name is Neville Goddard, and he says the feeling is the secret. And what Napoleon Hill is saying here is that when the brain is vibrating at a rapid rate, it not only attracts thoughts and ideas released by other brains through the medium of the ether, but it gives your own thoughts that feeling, which is essential before those thoughts will be picked up and acted upon by your subconscious mind. Thus, you will see that the broadcasting principle is the factor through which you mix feeling or emotion with your thoughts and pass them on to your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind, okay, this is good. Pay attention. This is a secret right here. The subconscious mind is the sending station of the brain through which vibrations of thought are broadcast. The creative imagination is the receiving set through which vibrations of thought are picked up from the ether. So even in terms of what I'm understanding, from my understanding of this, what Napoleon Hill is saying is, even when you're praying, when you send out a prayer, you're using the subconscious mind as the medium to send it out. And when you get an answer, and typically that answer will be in the form of a definite plan or an idea, you will actually receive that through your creative imagination. So that's where the two come in hand. So think about the subconscious mind, that chapter that we read yesterday. That's the sending station. And then you want to go back to the chapter on imagination and ask yourself, all right, what is the creative imagination? Because that is the thing, the receiving set that picks up vibrations of thought from the ether. Okay. Along with the important factors of the subconscious mind and the faculty of creative imagination, which constitute the sending and receiving sets of your mental broadcasting machinery, consider now the principle of autosuggestion, which is the medium by which you may put into operation your broadcasting station. Through the instructions described in the chapter on autosuggestion, you were definitely informed of the method by which desire may be transmuted into its monetary equivalent. Operation of your mental broadcasting station is a comparatively simple procedure. You have but three principles to bear in mind and to apply when you wish to use your brain or your broadcasting station. So those three principles are your subconscious mind, the creative imagination, and auto-suggestion. All right, so this is interesting. This is a new idea that I'm picking up. We got the chapter on the subconscious mind, and we got the chapter on the imagination. Those are the subconscious mind is how you send thoughts to the ether, and the creative imagination is how you receive those thoughts. And there's this one great chapter. It's, I believe, chapter 4, and is the chapter on autosuggestion. And Napoleon Hill advises you to read that chapter every night before going to bed for 30 days in a row. And it's interesting that he says that because he basically is saying to operate your brain or your mental broadcasting station, you have three principles to bear in mind and apply when you wish to use your brain. And that is the subconscious mind, the creative imagination, and auto suggestion. So keep those three in mind as we go through this philosophy over again, because those will be key. Those will be key to this. All right, continuing on, page 300. The stimuli through which you put these three principles into action have been described, and the procedure begins with desire. Page 301. The title is The Greatest Forces Are Intangible. The Depression brought the world to the very borderline of understanding of the forces which are intangible and unseen. Through the ages which have passed, man has depended too much upon his physical senses and has limited his knowledge to physical things, which he could see, touch, weigh, and measure. We are now entering the most marvelous of all ages, an age which will teach us something of the intangible forces of the world about us. Perhaps we shall learn as we pass through this age that the other self is more powerful than the physical self we see when we look into a mirror. What does that mean, the other self? What is Napoleon Hill referring to here? I don't think he goes into the other self here, but I will say this. There's this great book out there. It's also written by Napoleon Hill, and it's kind of the counter component to Think and Grow Rich. So Think and Grow Rich talks about all the great things, these 13 principles, basically how to achieve anything you want. But there's this one book that he also wrote, and he didn't release it until 70 years after his death. And that book was called Outwitting the Devil. And in the beginning of that book, he talks about how he discovered his other self. And I'm not going to touch upon it here because I want to focus still on the brain, or at least in this episode, I won't touch upon it as much. But I really recommend that you get this book called Outwitting the Devil and you read the beginning portion of it, and he'll talk about your other self much more in depth in a way that you'll understand it. And he says that perhaps we shall learn as we pass through this age that the other self is more powerful than the physical self we see when we look into a mirror. Sometimes men speak lightly of the intangibles, the things which they cannot perceive through any of their five senses. And when we hear them, it should remind us that all of us are controlled by forces which are unseen and intangible. The whole of mankind has not the power to cope with nor to control the intangible force wrapped up in the rolling waves of the oceans. Man has not the capacity to understand the intangible force of gravity, which keeps this little earth suspended in midair and keeps man from falling from it, much less the power to control that force. Man is entirely subservient to the intangible force which comes with a thunderstorm, and he is just as helpless in the presence of the intangible force of electricity. Nay, he does not even know what electricity is, where it comes from, or what is its purpose. Nor is this by any means the end of man's ignorance in connections with the things unseen and intangible. He does not understand the intangible force and intelligence wrapped up in the soil of the earth. The force which provides him with every morsel of food he eats, every article of clothing he wears, and every dollar he carries in his pockets. Okay, so we're talking about a little hoorah stuff right now, but he really is making a point that the greatest forces are intangible. I remember in college, I took this class, and it was called Astro 7N, and it was one of those easy gen eds that you take just to get an A in. And it's kind of about astrology and the universe. And I took it just to get an easy A. And I remember there was it was probably the greatest course I've ever taken in college, truthfully. Even though I did mechanical engineering, I was like, this course is what I was really looking forward to. And in that course, they actually describe that most of the universe, there's a physical. However, they describe that 2% of everything, like the universe is one part of this whole grand scheme. I'm not sure if you ever gone through the videos where they show the sun, and then like a million miles out, there's a bigger sun that's exponentially larger, and it goes on and on and on. So they actually explained that 98% of everything is this dark matter. And this dark matter is actually unseen and intangible. So just keep that in mind, that all the physical stuff that you're aware of is science has proven that it's only 2% of everything. And truthfully, the greatest forces make up 98% of everything. So um I don't know what to say. Uh, look up dark matter, look up the science behind it, do your own research. Don't take my word for it. That was just something I learned in college. Coolest thing I ever learned. Um, but yeah, Napoleon Hill's got a point with the greatest forces being intangible. So now we're going to talk about the dramatic story of the brain. Last but not least, man, with all of his boasted culture and education, understands little or nothing about the intangible force, the greatest of all intangibles of thought. Okay, so last but not least, man, with all of his boasted culture and education, understands little or nothing of the intangible force of thought. He knows but little concerning the physical brain and its vast network of intricate machinery through which the power of thought is translated into its material equivalent. But he is now entering an age which shall yield enlightenment on the subject. Already, men of science have begun to turn their attention to the study of this stupendous thing called a brain. And while they are still in the kindergarten stage of their studies, they have uncovered enough knowledge to know that the central switchboard of the human brain, the number of lines which connect the brain cells with one another, equal the figure 1 followed by 15 million ciphers. The figure is so stupendous, said Dr. C. Judson Herrick of the University of Chicago, that astronomical figures deal with hundreds of millions of light years that astronomical figures dealing with hundreds of millions of light years become insignificant by comparison. It has been determined that there are from 10 billion to 14 billion nerve cells in the human cerebral cortex, and we know that these are arranged in definite patterns. These arrangements are not haphazard, they are orderly. Recently, developed methods of electrophysiology draw off action currents from very precisely located cells or fibers with microelectrodes, amplify them with radio tubes, and record potential differences to a millionth of a volt. It is inconceivable that such a network of intricate machinery should be in existence for the sole purpose of carrying on the physical functions of incidental my bad. It is inconceivable that a network of intricate machinery should be in existence for the sole purpose of carrying on the physical functions incidental to growth and maintenance of the physical body. It is not likely that the same system, which gives billions of brain cells the media for communication with one another, provides also the means of communication with other intangible forces. Okay, so he's asking a question here. It is not likely that the same system, which gives billions of brain cells the media for communication with one another, provides also the means of communication with other intangible forces. After this book has been written, just before the manuscript went to the publisher, there appeared in the New York Times an editorial showing that at least one great university and one intelligent investigator in the field of mental phenomena are carrying on an organized research through which conclusions have been reached that parallel many of those described in this in the following chapter. The editorial briefly analyzed the work carried on by Dr. Rhine and his associates at Duke University, viz. And then it ends with a dash. Okay. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to ask you guys, what'd you learn, what'd you like just from the brain? Because we're getting into intangible forces, and I know sounds a little cuckoo at first, but science does back this up. I've done great research on some of this stuff, and it is cool to continue reading about the brain. I don't have any comments on it yet, but I really do want to hear from you guys. What are you learning? What are you liking so far on the brain? What do you think about it as a broadcasting system or a broadcasting and receiving station? What do you think about that? Now we're going to dive into page 304. What is telepathy? A month ago, we cited on this page some of the remarkable results achieved by Professor Rhine and his associates in Duke University from more than 100,000 tests to determine the existence of telepathy and clairvoyance. These results were summarized in the first two articles in Harper's Magazine. In the second, which has now appeared, the author, E.H. Wright, attempts to summarize what has been learned or what it seems reasonable to infer regarding the exact nature of these extrasensory modes of perception. The actual existence of telepathy and clairvoyance now seems to some scientists enormously probable as a result of Rhine's experiments. Various percipients were asked to name as many cards in a special pack as they could without looking at them and without other sensory access to them. About a score of men and women were discovered who could regularly name so many of the cards correctly that there was not one chance in a million of their having done their feats by luck or accident. But how did they do them? These powers, assuming that they exist, do not seem to be sensory. There's just no known organ for them. The experiments worked just as well at distance of several hundred miles as they did in the same room. These facts also dispose, in Mr. Wright's opinion, of the attempt to explain telepathy or clairvoyance through any physical theory or of radiation. All known forms of radiant energy decline inversely as the square of the distance transversed. However, telepathy and clairvoyance do not. So what is he saying? He's saying that they attempted to explain telepathy and clairvoyance through maybe a potential theory of radiation. However, scientists have shown that radiant energy declines inversely as distance increases, and it's actually like distance squared. So I took a class on heat transfer, and there's a formula for it, but I remember the denominator was like r squared. So like as distance increases, the radiation energy decreases exponentially. None of that really matters, but basically what he's saying is that telepathy and clairvoyance do not decrease. So they've done some experiments on telepathy and clairvoyance, and they actually have proven this. And we're going to continue reading. But they do vary through physical causes as our other mental powers do. Contrary to widespread opinion, they do not improve when the percipient is asleep or half asleep, but on the contrary, when he is most awake and alert. Rhine discovered that a narcotic will invariably lower a precipitant's score, while a stimulant will always send it higher. The most reliable performer apparently cannot make a good score unless he tries to do his best. One conclusion that Wright draws with some confidence is that telepathy and clairvoyance are really one and the same gift. That is, the faculty that sees a card face down on a table seems to be exactly the same as one that reads a thought residing residing only in another mind. So I do want to clarify something. What is telepathy and what is clairvoyance? I don't know, have the exact definition pulled up, and it's not stated specifically in this chapter, but it seems like telepathy is the power to read another individual's thoughts. And clairvoyance is, for example, you're looking at a card face down and you're able to just know what that card is. So that is the faculty. So he's saying that Napoleon Hill is essentially saying that Dr. Wright concluded that telepathy and clairvoyance are really one and the same gift. That is, the faculty that sees a card face down on a table seems to be exactly the same one that reads a thought residing only in another mind. There are several grounds for believing this. So far, for example, the two gifts have been found in every person who enjoys either of them. In everyone so far, the two have been of equal vigor, almost exactly. Screens, walls, distances have no effect at all on either. Wright advances from this conclusion to express what he puts forward as no more than the mere hunch that other extrasensory experiences, prophetic dreams, premonitions of disaster, and the like may also prove to be part of the same faculty. The reader is not asked to accept any of these conclusions unless he finds it necessary, but the evidence that Ryan has piled up must remain impressive. In view of Dr. Ryan's announcement in connection with the conditions under which the mind responds to what he terms extrasensory modes of perception, I now feel privileged to add to his testimony by stating that my associates and I have discovered what we believe to be ideal conditions under which the mind can be stimulated so that the sixth sense described in the next chapter can be made to function in a practical way. Okay, so we talk about telepathy and clairvoyance, but what does this mean to you? Like, why does it really matter, right? In the next chapter tomorrow, we're going to be reading on the sixth sense, and essentially Napoleon Hill has conducted 25 years of research and concluded that, okay, yeah, obviously it's cool to see a card face down. It's cool to read another person's mind. However, why not use it in a practical way? And so that practical way is in the final principle of this philosophy on understanding the sixth sense. So we're going to dive into that tomorrow. And yeah, so I'm going to continue here on out. The conditions to which I refer consist of a close working alliance between myself and two members of my staff. Through experimentation and practice, we have discovered how to stimulate our minds by applying the principle used in connection with the invisible counselors described in the next chapter, so that we can, by a process of blending our three minds into one, find the solution to a great variety of personal problems which are submitted by my clients. The procedure is very simple. We sit down at a conference table, clearly state the nature of the problem we have under consideration, and then begin discussing it. Each contributes whatever thoughts that may occur. The strange thing about this method of mind stimulation is that it places each participant in communication with unknown sources of knowledge definitely outside his own experience. If you understand the principle described in the chapter on the mastermind, you of course recognize the roundtable procedure here described as being a practical application of the mastermind. The method of mind stimulation through harmonious discussion of definite subjects between three people illustrates the simplest and most practical use of the mastermind. By adapting and following a similar plan, any student of this philosophy may come into possession of the famous Carnegie formula briefly described in the introduction. I do want to ask you guys, if you find what the famous Carnegie formula is, please drop it in the comments below. I'm looking for it. I'll add it if I do find it. But it was something that keeps getting mentioned, the famous Carnegie formula. and it's not explicitly stated in this book. But anyways, if it means nothing to you at this time, mark this page and read it again after you have finished the last chapter. Okay, finally, he concludes this chapter with, the depression was a blessing in disguise. It reduced the whole world to a new starting point that gives everyone a new opportunity. Wow. All right, cool. So I'm going to let that sink in for you. My question to you is, what does he mean? What does this telepathy stuff that we learned have to do with the principle of the mastermind? Why is he bringing that up again? What is this invisible counselors that he just mentioned? Don't worry about answering that question yet. That will be coming up in the chapter on the sixth sense, which is the next chapter that I'll be reading. Do you remember in the chapter on the mastermind, Napoleon Hill mentioned that when two minds come together, they invariably form a third intangible mind, and that, where it's like an intangible force, and that intangible force is likened to that of a third mind, as if someone else is there. And every time you come back, those two individuals come back, that mastermind alliance, that third mastermind that they talked about, has always been there, and they just review it again. Yeah, we're gonna be getting into some stuff that is not physical and not seen. It's gonna sound crazy at first. I remember my first time reading Think and Grow Rich, especially the chapter 14, The Sixth Sense. It made no sense to me at first, and I'm curious to see what it's gonna mean to me now that I'm trying to explain it to you guys. So it's going to be some good stuff. The chapter on the Sixth Sense is powerful. It takes me about an hour to read it myself, so we're going to split it up into multiple parts. But yeah, that's the chapter on the brain. That's that. I want to definitely open up it to comments. Like, I want to hear what you guys think about the brain. How much do we truly know about the brain, and how much is there really to explore about this machine? I can tell you this, from my personal belief, I don't think any computer out there, any AI created yet, is nearly as powerful as the brain. I thought it was interesting, the amount of, I think it was like 10 billion to 14 billion neural connections alone in the cerebral cortex of our brain, which isn't even the entire brain. It's like this little piece in our brain. There's almost 14 billion neural connections, and they're like ordered, like they're designed in an orderly fashion. So it's not like they're just there. They're designed for some specific way. I think our brains are super powerful. And something that I want to make a lifelong study personally is understanding my brain. I like what Elon Musk is doing, coming up with this idea of the Neuralink. I'm not going to say whether or not I would get one myself, but he's diving deep into the brain. I truly have to say it's deeper than what I know. I know like a kindergartner's education on it, and if at all. But yeah, this was some good stuff today. So that's that. The next chapter that I'll be reading will be on the Sixth Sense, and I really need your guys' help to understand this, because this is some hoorah stuff that's coming up. But yeah, let me know what you learned, what you liked, and yeah, stay tuned for more. So bye for now, Facebook, until we meet again. And yeah, YouTube, peace out, ladies and gentlemen. Until we meet again in time and space, even if you're watching the replay, who knows, maybe it's 1,000 years in the future and you're like reading this or checking this video out for the first time. So that's that. I appreciate you guys. Love you. See you until we meet again. Bye for now.